Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I am here to introduce you to college admissions representatives and other professionals in the field of college admissions. Our purpose is to serve you, the students and parents, so that you may gain insight straight from the people who ultimately make the decisions. Regardless of whether you apply to a particular school being highlighted in a given episode, you should listen to all of them, as each guest will give you tremendous insight and advice on every aspect of the college admissions process, prompting you to come up with your own follow-up questions for when you visit campus or meet with a college admissions representative yourself. Don't forget to visit our website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com, or the show notes of each episode to access the alphabetical list of all the colleges available with the related audio link to the right of each school. The alphabetical list provides you with on-demand access to all of the episodes so that you may listen whenever you wish. And if you want to receive links to episodes before they are released on the podcast, along with other related resources, please fill out the email opt-in form also available on our website and in the show notes of each episode. Lastly, please email me with any questions or comments at collegeadmissionstalk@gmail.com. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back today Jade Frevola, who's the Associate Director of Admissions at Adelphi University. Jade, I want to thank you because you were my absolute first interview. You were released back on February 5th of 2022. Of course, it was episode 1. So it's a great pleasure to have you back today. How are you, Jade?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me again and, allowing me to be a part of this podcast.
Well, we appreciate you more than you know, Jade. And like I said, it's been over a year since our last interview. So could you share with us how your experience has evolved during this time? And have there been any changes or new developments in the college admissions process that you'd like to share with us?
Of course. Yeah. So in the past year and a half, I've had the opportunity to grow in this field between being promoted to Associate Director of Admissions for Adelphi, as well as attending some professional regional conferences for the New England Association for College Admissions Counseling, or NEACAC, as we so fondly call it, and really network with other professionals on both the college and high school side. I think it's so important for people in this profession to always be growing and always be thinking about how we can better the student experience in relation to college admissions. I know for Adelphi personally, we implemented online decision release this year, which was super exciting. So that allowed students to have a portal to get updates about their decision and their scholarship information in real time once a decision had been finalized. And that really helped ease some of the anxiety of waiting and wanting to know for our applicants.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the promotion. That's fantastic. And I also love how you talked about the online decision release portal, which, like you said, anything that we could do to help reduce the anxiety for the students is always something that is appreciated on behalf of the students and, of course, the parents. So, Jade, Adelphi University has consistently attracted a diverse range of students. Could you talk about some of the unique aspects of Adelphi that make it so appealing for so many students to want to apply and ultimately attend?
Of course. So Adelphi has always prided itself on being a warm and welcoming place for students to learn and grow. So about 51% of our students are from diverse backgrounds, and we welcome students from 68 countries and 43 different states. So we really do have students coming from all across the country and all across the world. So Momentum 2, which is the second phase of our university's strategic plan, really focuses on academic distinction, building an inclusive community and connectivity, as well as smart growth and infrastructure. And having these clear goals defined really help faculty, staff, and senior leadership make meaningful decisions that focus on the day-to-day as well as the larger picture for our students. So one of the things that I always like to highlight about Adelphi is that for the past 5 years, we've been awarded the HEED Award, which is for Higher Education Excellence in Diversity. We've also achieved a perfect score of 5 out of 5 stars on the Campus Pride Index, which is the overall indicator of an institutional commitment to LGBTQ inclusive policy. And we also are working towards a shift from being an emerging Hispanic serving institution to a designated Hispanic serving institution. So I think part of what helps us achieve those goals and really attract students is the fact that we, offer diversity training for all of our faculty and staff and have an award-winning mentoring and career guidance program for students. We've also been named 10th in the nation for the best colleges for students with autism and one of the 50 best disability-friendly colleges and universities. And having all these supports in place really help students from all different walks of life succeed and thrive at Adelphi, both in and out of the classroom. And I think that makes them super excited to join the community that we have created and picture themselves finding a home here.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the diversity. You said that there are over 60 countries represented, over 40 states, which makes it sound like there truly is something for everyone. And I know that in our previous conversation, we discussed the impressive services Adelphi offers students with IEPs or 504s while they were in high school. Jade, could you provide an update on those programs and what advice would you give students as they navigate the college admissions process? In other words, are there any specific steps or considerations they should keep in mind?
Sure. So one of my favorite things that Adelphi does really well is to help cross-train staff from different departments. So we actually have liaisons in both the Learning Resource Program, which is for students with a documented learning disability or ADHD, and Bridges to Adelphi, which is for students who self-disclose that they're on the autism spectrum who have other nonverbal or neurological social disorders. So those liaisons will come to our staff meetings and give us updates about the programs that they're excited to share with families. So for the Learning Resource Program, we do tell students that there is documentation required and there is a separate application process that will need to be completed. But this program offers many benefits, including group and individual counseling, parent support groups, which I know is something that the parents are really excited about, to meet other parents who have students involved in the program and kind of have that support of having their peers be there for them. But my favorite is probably the 2 specialized courses within this program. So they are credit-bearing courses, writing courses that they meet the university-specific general education requirements, but they're specific to this program with even smaller class sizes than the average Adelphi class, which is only 21 students, but these are even smaller. And they have just a really inclusive teaching approach and opportunity for these students because we know that a writing-based class might be one of the things they really struggle with. For Bridges to Adelphi, there isn't a separate application required, and there is no documentation required for this program. If a student or a family feels they'd be a good fit for the program, they're more than welcome to be involved. There is an interest form on our website that we recommend families fill out to connect with the program. But just some quick highlights about it. We have our sensory room, which is always something I love to highlight, and I really appreciate that during our larger fall open houses and accepted student days in the spring, Bridges actually hosts individual events in their offices in Earl Hall, since large events can sometimes be really overwhelming for students. So I love that, their care and commitment is there from the first time that maybe you're interacting with the program. And Bridges will offer academic, social, and vocational support for students. We even have an executive organizer within the program that will help students with things like executive functioning difficulties or organizational skills. And, for students who are interested in either the Bridges to Adelphi or the Learning Resource Program, my suggestion is always to just connect with the programs directly. They are amazing resources for students. They love working with families firsthand and figuring out if the services and Adelphi by extension would be a good fit for them.
Well, I appreciate that. And by the way, one of the reasons why you were episode 1 in my first interview is because when I was doing my own research for my family, I remember the amazing resources that Adelphi has for all students. So, Jade, as you know, if there are any links that you want me to include, in addition to the Office of Undergraduate Admissions for Adelphi, just send them to me. And of course, whether it's the Bridges program or anything else that you mentioned, provide it to me. And of course, I'll make it available to the students and parents in the show notes. So getting to the actual application, Jade, what are the different ways
a student may apply to Adelphi University? And is there a benefit to applying one way over the other?
Of course. Yeah. So I know that the terminology can be something that is, a barrier that families come across, and they can be very confused by all the different options. So at Adelphi, we offer both early action and rolling admissions. So early action, it means that it's non-binding. If you just want to get a decision from us earlier, figure out what that decision is going to be. If you're going to wind up attending Adelphi in the future, that's something you can do. And rolling admissions means that we review applications on a rolling basis. So we don't wait to release admissions decisions on a certain date. If you apply, usually within a 2 to 4 week turnaround, we will get you an answer. So if you and your friend are both applying and you apply first, you're probably going to get your decision first. What I like to tell students is early action, since it is non-binding, meaning that there's no commitment to attend even if you are accepted, is always my personal recommendation on how to apply if possible. So if a student completes their application by December 1st, we're able to get them a decision by January 1st. And, choosing the right college for you is such an important decision. And I think the more time you give yourself and your family to discuss all the options, compare and contrast offers, and attend campus tours and events, the better. I think knowing by January is also just a great way to enjoy the last half of your senior year and really be present for all of the exciting things that go on during your last few months in high school.
Well, that's great advice to apply early and then get your decision early. You mentioned that you have early action, which of course is non-binding. You also mentioned the rolling admissions, that you review applications as they come in, and generally it's a 2 to 4 week turnaround, which is amazing. Let me ask you as a follow-up, when does your rolling admissions application open up at Adelphi?
So it usually opens up at the end of August, early September.
Right.
So it really just depends sometimes with the Common App, how quickly they get everything up and going. But that's usually a good guideline for when students can start to apply.
Right. And so to your point earlier, if you apply right at the very beginning of senior year, you get your decision hopefully within that month, and then you could enjoy your senior year students. So great advice, Jade. We really appreciate you sharing that. And could you share the average profile of the current freshman class at Adelphi University in terms of GPA, as well as any other relevant data such as SAT or ACT scores? And Jade, if a student falls lower, what are some of the things that they can do to enhance their overall application?
Sure. So this year's incoming class had an average GPA of around a 3.5, which is equivalent to an 88 or a B plus. The average SAT was around a 1210, and it was a 25 on the ACT. Adelphi offers a holistic review of application, so we'll also be looking at your essay, letters of recommendation, and resume if submitted to see if you'd be a good fit for Adelphi. We usually tell students who are debating, test optional or, should they submit testing or not. I think of it as a supplemental piece. So if you think your GPA speaks for itself, and maybe your test scores just weren't as high as you wanted them to be, or you're just not a great test taker, I think applying without them is beneficial for those students. But let's say maybe your GPA is not where you wanted it to be. You don't think it is a true indicator of who you are as a student. Maybe there was just a year where life had to come first and, school wasn't the most important thing. So having maybe a higher test score can help balance out, that lower GPA. But I do really feel that there is benefit in, writing a really good essay, having a strong letter of recommendation that can really talk about your character and what an amazing fit you would be for a school, because sometimes looking and seeing if a student would be a great campus citizen is just as important as, a good grade in English or history.
Well, that's great insight and advice. And a question that comes up a lot, I get separate emails from students and parents. It's the GPA indicated on the transcript. Do you use the one indicated on the transcript, or do you recalculate the GPA using your own metrics? If so, Jade, what do you look at from a student's academic record or the transcript itself, and how do you evaluate them?
Sure. So I think, part of why that question can be super confusing for families is the answer is different for every single school. It might even be different from year to year at a school. But currently at Adelphi, for the most part, we will use a high school's weighted GPA that is on the transcript, as long as the scale they're using is comparable to Adelphi's. So some either out-of-state schools or private schools might use like a 5.0 scale or a 10.0 scale. So there is some behind the scenes magic that may be required for us to bring it back down to, a 4.0 scale. But we do try our best to review the transcripts in a way that would be most beneficial to students. We don't want all of their hard work to be kind of wiped away with a complete recalculation if that's not necessary.
Understood, Jade. And I know that Adelphi, like many other schools, is in fact test optional. Can you share the percentage of students that apply and that are ultimately admitted that did not submit their test scores? And does this change based on a student's intended major?
So I think this is a question that I have an answer for, but the data might be skewed a little bit, and I will explain that. So this year, about 27% of our accepted students submitted SAT or ACT scores. Their total acceptance rate was actually a touch higher than test optional students, but I think that may be, like I said, a little bit skewed because most students are only submitting those test scores if they scored really well on them. So, each year, and I think this is going to be across the board, not just at Adelphi, but test optional schools, those average test scores are going to rise each year because if someone got a 900 on it, they're probably not going to submit testing. The other thing with like the intended major, I think that information can be a little bit skewed as well because we do have a number of joint degree programs at Adelphi. A lot of them are medicine or health related. So those are a lot of students in biology majors that if they want to be considered for these programs have to submit testing. And that's a requirement by the joint degree school, not necessarily Adelphi. So those schools require the testing. So a lot of our biology students submit testing. But I think that might be, like I said, a little bit skewed, not completely like data that you can take as is because of the fact that they're applying to a program that requires it.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you so much for the clarifications. And yes, it's very important if a school says that they are test optional, first of all, to check whether or not your intended major requires it. So in the case of biology, like you said, they require it. So those numbers might be off compared to the general pool. And speaking of the general pool, it's also important to remember, as Jade said, the mid 50 is skewed because only the students that are scoring well are submitting. So just be aware of that because sometimes a student will look at the mid 50, they see that the test scores are higher than what they have, and they get discouraged. Remember, students, schools are test optional, and they mean it when they say that they are test optional. So work hard, prepare for your ACT, prepare for the SAT, and if you're in that mid 50% or higher, submit. If you're not, schools are test optional, and they'll just look at everything else. Would you agree with that, Jade?
Of course, yeah. So for all of Adelphi's programs that we offer in-house, so even like for nursing, which is always super competitive, those are all test optional. You're still eligible to be reviewed for the honors college if you would like that. You're still eligible for academic scholarship with test optional. We always just recommend that if you are kind of below that 50%, it may be beneficial scholarship-wise to just submit your GPA if you think it speaks for itself.
Well, that's great insight, and this is why we have these conversations. And Jade, with the increase in schools going test optional and the ease with which to apply to multiple schools, thanks to things like the Common Application, as admissions professionals, how do you determine the number of applicants to accept, waitlist, and even deny when you obviously receive far more applications from deserving candidates than your seats available?
So I think, we use a lot of past data to try to figure out, how many seats we have for a specific program and for a class in general. A school always wants to admit an amazing class, but we also need to make sure that we have the infrastructure in support of all these students coming to campus. I think what it comes down to is for some of our more competitive programs, there might be increased criteria to get into them. So, for something like our nursing majors, that's our most popular and competitive program at Adelphi, we might be taking a closer look at your math and science cores in conjunction with your overall GPA. It also may come down to, we accept everyone who is eligible for the program, but it might come down to the capacity when it comes down to deposit, which is always why I recommend that early action for competitive programs like nursing, biology, and computer science. Because if you know a school is your first pick, If you're accepted, the sooner that you deposit for that program, the less of a chance you have of maybe getting waitlisted for it.
Well, that's great insight. And Jade, how significant is it for potential students to visit Adelphi or attend virtual meetings or events as part of the application process? And do you track such things when evaluating an application?
Yeah, so that's something that, we call on the college side demonstrated interest. Basically, nobody, whether it is a college and an applicant or any type of relationship you can have, you never want to be in a one-sided relationship, right? So if we see that a student is interested in us, we are interested in them. But we, don't want to be bothering a student or bombarding them with, emails and requests to meet with us if we're just really not a good fit for them. So I think by attending the events of a school that you're interested in, you're showing them that you have, the potential of attending there in the fall. I think that really comes down to, some of that holistic review of, okay, if it's between you and another student and you have been consistently coming to our events or interacting with us or reaching out to us with questions and, you're super interested in coming, you might get accepted over that other student. It also is really helpful for, when it comes down to things like seeing if there's any possibility for reconsideration of scholarship. If we see that you are someone who, you already have your Adelphi sweatshirt, you have been to every event since, you were old enough to walk around campus, that's someone that we're going to advocate for and say, this student really wants to be here. I think it's important that we give some additional consideration for them or really, speak on their behalf. So I definitely think it's important. I also think it's important for the students because that's how you're going to find out if a school is a good fit for you. If you've, never attended any of their events or you've never visited or you've never really interacted with them, it's hard to, determine if this is really where you want to be in the future.
Well, that's a great overview and great advice in terms of demonstrated interest. Like you said, whether a school says that they track it or not, it's very important students to engage, to let them know that you're interested. First of all, of course, to let them know that you want to attend, in this case, Adelphi University, but also for your own research. When you attend a virtual or an in-person event, you're only learning more about the institution. So great advice, Jay. We appreciate that. And while many colleges typically request 2 letters of recommendation, Jay, do you recommend that students submit additional letters from mentors outside of their academic environment, such as coaches or advisors from extracurricular activities or their volunteer experience? And how can these additional letters contribute to the overall application?
So at Adelphi, we actually only require 1 letter of recommendation, but you're welcome to submit as many as you have. I think this is really where that holistic approach to admissions comes into play because these are people who are getting to know you, inside the classroom, outside of the classroom. They can talk about your passions and what you're interested in pursuing in the future, and it really gives great context as to, why you're pursuing this program, or maybe they can add some context into why a grade was lower one year. It's really hard for us sometimes as, admissions professionals to make this determination when there's very little information. So I think the more context you can submit, the better, especially if maybe you didn't have an amazing relationship with your teachers, but there's a coach that has, been with you all throughout high school. They have seen you grow as a person and as a student, and they really want to sing your praises. I think there's such a great, benefit to submitting that to schools. I always tell people, you're basically packaging your whole life up into this little application and hoping that the schools see you for who you are. And, like I said, there's no such thing as too much context.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I've been receiving some emails specifically from parents asking about dual enrollment classes, AP and IB. So, Jay, does Adelphi accept them for class credit?
Yeah, so Adelphi does accept AP credits, IB, as well as dual enrollment classes from other like local institutions. So we accept up to 30 college credits coming from high school. It can be a combination of these three. It could be 30 credits just from AP credits, whatever the student has. So on our website, we do have kind of a rubric or a chart for AP or IB courses. So there are certain scores that students have to achieve in order to get credit. For the most part, we accept 4s and 5s, but there are some exams that we do accept a 3 in. I know just off the top of my head, psychology being one of them. So you're not required to look over any of that information. You can just submit the scores to us and we will look it over for you. But if you're interested in the meantime to get an idea, you're more than welcome to do that. And for the dual enrollment classes, we would just need a copy of that official transcript from the school in which you took the credits through. So you can usually just contact their registrar's office and ask for a copy of your transcript and they can submit that over to us.
Well, it's great that you accept up to 30 college credits. That's amazing and very important students and parents to check the Adelphi University website for their rubric. And of course, Jade, again, if you want to send that link to me, I'll make it available in the show notes. What about students aspiring to play sports in college? What advice do you have for prospective student athletes in terms of making their intentions to play known?
Sure. So I think, with student athletes, there's no such thing as too early to figure out what the NCAA eligibility requirements are, as well as the school that you're interested in, connecting with those coaches. So I actually oversee kind of the partnership that admissions has with our athletic coaches. And this year alone, we were talking about students who are coming for fall 2023, but they're already talking about students who are potentially coming for fall 2024. So it's important to kind of make your intentions known for Adelphi. That is a pretty simple process. And I can include this link as well so it can be tagged to this podcast. But we have a prospective student athlete form that students can fill out. It's basically just a great first line of communication with coaches. It gets all of your contact information so they can reach out to you and kind of go through that process. Because if you have your heart set on playing, soccer in college, a school you could be interested in might not have room on their roster right away. So it's important to kind of get in touch with these coaches first, figure out what their team roster is looking like and seeing where you might be a good fit.
Well, we appreciate that. And Jade, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Before I get to the last question, I was just curious, was there a question that I didn't ask that you wish I had, or any other topic that I didn't bring up related to Adelphi University that you want to share with us now?
Well, I think one of the things that happened this past year that we were really, really excited about is we actually won an award for our support of first-year undecided students. So through that kind of career guidance pathway, helping students who aren't 100% sure what they want to do in the future really kind of figure out what their passions are and, what their strengths are and how to play to them. So that was always something that I love to highlight this year because I went to school as an undecided student. And it's just a really great opportunity to not feel like you're kind of left alone in the dark to figure it all out on your own. We know that when you are applying to college, you might be 16, 17, 18 years old. We don't expect you to have it all figured out at that time. So I think having that program is really, really helpful for students to kind of start college knowing that they're going to have help along the way.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that and congratulations. That's awesome. And
Thank you.
so, our last question, Jade, what are your top 3 pieces of advice you would provide a student and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Sure. So I think the first, and I might have touched on this on our first podcast together, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I think it's such an important one, is really have an agreed upon plan in terms of timelines and discussions. Someone had brought it up to me in the kind of framework of how would you feel if your boss just walked into your office with no notice and they were like, I want to have a meeting about this right now. That would be very unprofessional for them to do that. We always ask hey, can we set a meeting at this date? This is the topics I want to go over. And you agree upon a time that works for both of your schedules. And I think that parents should be doing that with their kids as well. High school can be hectic. And if they had a really long day, maybe they had a test, maybe, just something didn't go right with their friends, or they had a sporting event and they lost the game, to kind of spring this conversation about okay, where are you applying? What have you done? Did you do your essay already? I don't think that's fair. So I think kind of having an agreed upon plan of saying, next Thursday at 6 o'clock, can we sit down and talk about what the plans are for X, Y, and Z? These students are becoming adults, and I think it's really important to treat them like that. I think that kind of leads into my second piece of advice, which is for parents, is you have to, I know it's hard, but you have to try to let your students take the reins here. So they should really be the ones, whenever possible, talking with the admissions counselors, whether it's through emails or in meetings. I know that it is intimidating. I know that's not something I was looking forward to when I was in college. I was used to my mom doing everything for me, setting up doctor's appointments and all these things. But this is really an important time for them to start self-advocating, because in college, your professors are definitely a resource, and they will kind of check in and make sure you're doing okay. But as an adult, you're expected to ask for help when you need it. They can't read your mind. So it's important to kind of start that process of advocating for yourself right now. And then I think my final piece of advice is just to be very respectful of each other's wishes. Students, you need to have an honest and open conversation with your parents about, budgeting, who's paying for college, who's going to be responsible for X, Y, and Z, which schools, might not be a realistic, first year school. Maybe you need to go to community college first and then transfer to a school if it's a little bit out of your price range. And for parents, you may wish for your child to follow in your footsteps, either at a specific school or in a specific major, but ultimately it needs to be a good fit for the student who's going to be attending there in order to ensure the success both academically and socially at the institution.
Well, Jade, thank you so much for coming back for a second episode. This was truly awesome. I really appreciate your insight and your time today. I do hope to have you again, Jade. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Take care, everyone, and good luck with the college process.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP.